Hi guys, today we are going to be making a watercolor landscape, and our next step will be to talk about how to draw out your landscape and the different components of space and how to get that all laid out. Before we get started with our landscape paintings, we're going to talk a little bit about how to create depth in your painting and how you will arrange your drawing before you do your actual painting. So the first thing we're going to look at are the three components of space that you will have in there. And the first one is the foreground, and that's the area that is closest to you in a piece. The middle ground would be, of course, what's in the middle, and then you will have your background. Another way to look at that is in this chart here, and this just shows picture space. And this would obviously represent the three-dimensional space, and then this area right here is your actual picture plane. So you still have background, middle ground, foreground, but what you're seeing actually on your paper would just be this section right here. Now you can choose lots of different types of landscapes, but I prefer you choose a photo to work from. This will help you with colors and also with composition. So here's one type of landscape, has some bright coloring, but it definitely has foreground in this area with the trees and the green grass. Then back here, there's a valley area of trees, and then your background would be your far hills or mountains in the distance and the sky. Okay, so here's another example of a landscape. This one has a road in it. And this also provides depth in the fact that the road starts out large and then goes back toward a vanishing point in the distance. So it starts out large and gets smaller. But the road is also in the foreground. We have hills in the middle ground. And also in the middle ground we have some water. And then in the distance we have mountains. So that would be your background. This would be an example of a desert landscape. We also have foreground with the plants and the rocks. Middle ground would be established within the cacti, and then there are hills or mountains in the distance. The large rock here would be considered either part of your foreground or middle ground. Over here it's a little bit closer, but then it goes off toward the middle. And then finally I have a kind of a Midwestern style landscape. And even though this one's quite simple, it still has those three components. So you have your bale of hay here, which is in the foreground. You have smaller bales of hay in the middle of the ground, and in the background you have your horizon line and your sky. So that would also work for a landscape. So the other thing you can do is choose what you want to include in your painting. So while this painting is very busy, has tons of cacti, tons of bushes and things, I'm probably going to just simplify this and make it more of my own by eliminating some of the areas, and then I'm probably going to take some of the coloring and brighten that up, change that up a bit as well. But I am going to put just a few of the outline elements in there so you can see what my base drawing would be. So the first thing I'm going to establish is where my horizon line is. Now, horizon line is where your sky meets your land, and that would be on my hills, but there's also kind of a straight line basis here, which I would also consider, you know, your horizon line. So I'm going to put that line in first lightly, and then I'm going to draw over the top of it. So I can also tell that that line is about halfway into my paper because I have equal sections of sky and equal sections of land in this picture. So my horizon line is going to come somewhere in the middle, and again I'm drawing a marker. You're going to want to do yours in pencil. And then the next thing I'm going to add in the background would be the mountain lines. So I could put that in. I also know that I'm going to have my giant rock. This is probably somewhere in like Utah or somewhere. And my rock is starting below that line. I'm going to put this one in first because my mountain will break up behind it. It starts just a little bit below that line and comes up, kind of goes up to the top of the paper over here in the corner. And then I have the shadow line from the, you know, from the edge of the rock here that's going to come over. So I'm going to draw that separately. It goes up to the top. And then where do I want to end up? Well, just a little right of center here. So I'll put that rock in. And it goes up off the page. Now it looks kind of weird right now. If I were doing this in pencil, I'd erase these sections. And then I know that I want the mountain line in there, so I'm going to go ahead and put some of that. And that starts right about here and then up. I know I'm going to have a cactus here, so I'm going to leave a little space. And then the mountain's there. And then I have some here. And then I have a big cactus that I'm going to include right on the side of the drawing here. So I'm going to have that one start down toward the lower, probably third of the paper. So right about here is where my base is. I'm going to draw it in sections for now. I'm going to draw up the main part, which is just, you know, one long singular, looks almost like a tube. Then I've got above, right around where the mountains start, I have an arm that comes off this way. And then I have one that comes up this way. And then one that starts down below the other one that comes up off of here. Okay, so now I've got my cactus in there. I've got the rock. Now I need to put in some other things in the background. I'm going to put one of these large cactuses back here. This is going to help me to establish depth in the picture and give it more a sense of space. Okay, and then I've got another one right here. There's some other ones back here that I might just draw a few for interest, but I'm not going to put all of them in there. Then what I'll do is I'm going to put in some of these bushes. So I know that they're going to be right around here and here and here. I've got some bigger rocks right through here. Might put some of those in. And then, you know, I've got a large rock here and here. And again, if you're not sure what the shape is, then come up to your source photo because all the information you need is right there. If you take your pencil or finger and just slightly go around it like this, and you feel the motion, that's the same motion that you're going to be making on your paper. Then I've got another shape right here. So it's really about identifying shapes and getting that motion in there. So I've got both of these rocks in here now. And I have some more bushes, and I know my bushes are rather, you know, just free form because I think they're more like tumbleweed type things. Not really sure. And then I would have some right up here going off the edge of the paper, which is my foreground area. And I'm just kind of making marks to imply that that's where those will be. And there's a little bit of a jagged rock here. Okay. I also have some clouds in my sky. I would probably lightly put in pencil where those would be. So there's going to be right around here, and then I've got a little cloud right through here, and maybe off to here. So really, minus these areas where it's overlapping because I can't erase those, this would essentially be the layout of my painting. And it looks a lot like a coloring book because it's a contour outline, which is what you're looking for because you want just simple outlines that you can allow the paint to go into the open areas and create your painting. So what if I were not doing this one? What if I were doing something with the road in it? I'll show you how to kind of outline that one real quick. So when you take your paper for this, then I want you to notice a couple of things. First, where does the roadway meet the edge of the paper? So it's not at the bottom corner, it's up a ways on both sides. So I know that my corner's right here is where the road starts, and right about halfway through the paper is where the road just comes slightly above that. So I'm going to look at my paper and know that this is about halfway. I know my road is going to extend, go over here, and then end up here a little above the half. So, and then I also have sort of a horizon line here on the edge of the lake, and that's above the halfway mark. more like right through here, and then I'll have mountains. So I'm sort of mapping this out in my head and visualizing what that's going to look like on the paper. So first thing I'm going to do is I also know that this hill is going to come over, and then I have that line because there's a body of water right here. So I'm going to make a little mark here, one here, so you can see where my roadway will start. And let me see. Then I'm going to draw the first line of the road in, and it kind of curves in, goes out, gets skinnier there. Then I'm going to draw the other side of it. And this one's going to come way out and then kind of curve down over to the side. So here's my actual road. Looks kind of wonky right now, but that's really kind of the shape of it in the picture. I also have some yellow lines that would come right out to about here. And those get wider as they come out because they're getting closer to you. Okay, so I have the yellow lines. I'd say right about here is where I have that white line, and I know it comes over to the edge of the paper. And then I have another white line here, and I have one here, and then I have a white line that comes right here. There are some little borders up here. They're very thin, and this line does continue around. And if you get that wrong, you'll be able to erase it and then correct it, so that's not a big deal. Right at the end of the road, though, I have a few things happening. I have some groups of trees here, and I want you to notice the shape of that area. Don't go in and try to draw individual trees, because that's really not what you can see there. I mean, you know they're individual trees, but it's really like a large grouping of textured dark greens and lighter greens. So that's what I'm going to put in, is just the shape. And then up here, little bumpy textured shapes of those tops of those trees there. Then over to the other side, we have another grouping of trees, and it comes in a shape like this because this road disappears behind the hill and the trees. This is the hill, these are the trees. And then out from the trees, we have this line here. That's the edge of the roadway, the edge of the land that borders the road. Okay, and these kind of come in, and these kind of slope down into a hill there. So there are some lines that kind of go in a diagonal slant there, and then that's going to come over. So now I've got the land, and then above these trees I have a little bit of land back there, and then it slopes off until this hill here. And there's a dark valued part of the hill and a lighter valued part. So I'll come up that direction with that. Then I'm going to put in this water line, which is right back here. Now this upper section is where I need to squeeze in some mountains, and that starts right above here. I've got pointy, jagged rocks. Don't worry if yours don't match perfectly, because nobody's going to see the photo you're looking at. They're going to look at your painting. So you're using this as a way to guide you in creating your own piece. Your colors will be different, and it will vary quite a bit, but you're using this as your source of inspiration. There's also some dark areas there. So now this would be the light blue water area, this would be the road, and then we've got all of our areas. So this would be my outline for that painting. So that one's a more complex one, a little bit. Probably one of the simpler ones to do would be something like this, because you've only got just a few things that you're going to be drawing there. You've got a diagonal line here, and then you have a hill in the background, and then you have the valley down here, and then you got some trees on top. So really pay attention to right here where that separates, and that is a little under half. So if this is half, I'm going to start right about here. And then this line is going to extend down to right about here on my paper. So let me get that on there. And then I have trees over here. Right here I've got a tree. I'm going to put the shape in. And then behind that I have the hills. Have a little bit of a sun area here. I'm not gonna worry too much about that. I definitely wouldn't draw it in marker on your paper, and I would be very light with it when you draw it in pencil, because whenever you're doing yellow, pencil marks show through a lot. Then I have this valley area back here. I have another larger tree that comes up here. Valley. Another really large tree, probably, I think it's a group of two actually. Right here, trees here, and then they come down. And then we've got some smaller trees and sort of another visual line here that kind of comes down like this. We've got some trees here, lots of trees through here. So I'd say it's more of an asymmetrically balanced picture because you have more of your trees here and open here area. This one tree is kind of balancing this group of trees over here. And then maybe just a few trees here, maybe a little tree right here. Okay, so they don't really look a lot like trees, but they're outlined. So this would be the contour drawing that would represent that picture. So you kind of get the idea of what you're doing with your picture. Next, what we're gonna do is start the watercolor part. So I'm gonna resketch one of these out in pencil on watercolor paper, and I'll show you how to get started with those. Okay, before I start painting, I'm going to be taping my paper down to the table, and I'm just going to use some of this thinner tape for watercolor, because when you're painting and your paper gets wet, it will tend to warp a little bit, and this will allow it to stay flat while you're working a little more, and it will help the paper stretch back out as it dries. So you're just going to put a very thin border around your edge. There we go. So now it's all taped down, and then we'll go through the watercolor process. So now we are prepping to paint. We've got everything taped down. I've got my pencil sketch on there. I have my watercolors, which I'm just using a Crayola palette, just like you have at school. And the one thing that you want to do, these are concentrated watercolors, and you need to kind of activate them by adding droplets of water in each one. So if you take a big brush and fill it with some water and just drop that into each of the colors and let that loosen up a bit, that is going to help loosen up the pigments, and the more you stir that around, the more vibrant your colors will be. Now if you want a washed out color, obviously you're going to add more water to it, but make sure that your waters are in there first so everything's nice and wet, and that way it will paint for you much easier. So it's going to go through. I used this yesterday, so it's still a little bit wet. Also make sure that your mixing palette, which is up here, is clean. Now if you've got leftover paint on there, then just wet it. Take a tissue, like a Kleenex, and just wipe that out, because you will need those areas while you're cleaning. Now when you're doing a watercolor painting, these are a lot different than doing an acrylic painting, because a watercolor painting will develop from light to dark. So you'll see light washes of things, and then that will build up into a more detailed painting with more darks in it. So what we're going to do is start with some of the background areas, and they will be rather light to begin with. A lot of these things will, and then we'll slowly add in some of those darker shadows. So I am going to go ahead and shut this off and go into time-lapse mode, because it's a little easier to see how the painting builds up that way, rather than waiting through a lot of time to see a little bit happen.